Hi everyone, welcome to We Belong Education podcast. My name is Saurubh. I am joined with the co-host Helen. How are you doing, Helen?
Hey everybody, I'm good.
Good, good. We have two guests today with us, Helen. Two of them.
We
We have,
do. It's a full room today.
yeah, we are becoming popular. Hey. Um, and before the podcast, I asked them, would they like me to introduce them, or they would like to introduce themselves, and they're like, yeah, stay consistent. You introduce. So let me introduce the guest.
I'm just fishing
What?
for a compliment.
Yeah,
That's the whole reason. I've been waiting. What do you say? 10 years we've known each other. This
yeah,
is
no,
the time you have to say something nice about me. So you do the
yeah.
introduction for sure.
And here
And
I
they,
was
they're going to
thinking,
take notes later and compare who do you love the most.
right. And here I was thinking that I would just say, one is Nate, one is Thomas. So the next one,
That's the nicest thing you've ever said.
well, I'll start with Nate because he's on my left, so it's easier to go from left to right for me. Nate and I have known each other for more than 10 years. Nate had been working with children. That's how we kind of got together, working with children, and has been leading in the sector for what, 8 or 9 of that, Nate?
Yeah.
Father of two
It'd have
kids,
to be. Yep.
father of two kids, and a really good listener when he wants to be.
You
Very.
have to be when you're friends with you, Sarah.
Wow. Okay, that's a compliment, I guess. On my right is Thomas. Thomas, how you doing?
I'm good, thanks. Thanks for inviting me.
Thanks for coming. Very, very busy person, Thomas. Head of Wesley Mission Uch from Sydney, and has been in sector for also 10 plus years, isn't it, Thomas? Oh, more.
It's my 20th anniversary next year.
Wow. And I was here to say 10, so of course
All right.
I'm not
Don't
doing good.
minimize what he's done,
I'm not
Sarah.
doing good with the introduction. Hey,
I
Nate
thought
is a
you would maybe ask questions before introducing me, but you
yeah.
didn't.
Yeah, I'll do that for the next guest. Maybe, as I said, I never said I'm a good listener. I said Nate is a good listener. I'm sure Thomas would have told me about his experiences in the past. So Thomas and I have been working on several projects, and Thomas has actually worked in in this sector in several capacities. Now heading the organization, but we've been on the floor together, managed a service, now leading the organization, which is amazing. So, welcome to the podcast. I'm speaking on behalf of Helen as well. We are absolutely excited to have you on the podcast. Helen and I recorded a podcast for you a couple of weeks ago, and we said that we usually talk for more than an hour, anyways. So why don't we formalize it? And same goes with you all. That when I call you, things go for more than an hour. So the topic, Helen, do you want to talk about the
Oh,
topic?
hang on. I want to jump in for a sec. Since we've got a room full of friends today, I think I didn't tell you I was going to bring this up, but I think it's really important. Um, can we just talk about the fact that you have just published something? Do you want to tell us about that, Sarah?
Oh, $5 will be transferred to your account.
Oh,
Uh,
thank you so much. I didn't give you so you've just published Beyond the School Day with
yes,
Early Childhood Australia with a few notable people. Do you want
very
to tell us
important
about
people.
it?
Yeah, well, my contribution is just being a team member in that. To be honest, it was really nice to write that Beyond the School publication. Jenny, my mentor, Bruce Hurst, my other mentor, and Natalie, we four wrote that, I'm going to say thing, or I could say
Hmm.
booklet to be
Hmm.
more. And maybe we can provide the link. So yeah, it got released maybe 3 weeks ago, but on my social media, I kind of did it now. So yeah, that's pretty much it. But I had a great experience doing it because what I'm learning more about research is that when you research, you learn a lot more about yourself than actual the content. So
Mm.
kind of learning a little bit about myself, which will take more than an hour to kind of. So I rather not. We'll
Mm.
do a podcast on that one day. So, well, Helen, as you're speaking, how about you tell the audience about our topic as well, because it came from you. So I want you to
Well,
tell.
it was your hot seat question to me was, have I ever sworn in front of children at work? And then, of course, I don't know. I think you just want to say a few F-bombs on a recording because you got really excited. You're like, we need to do a whole podcast on swearing. I'm going to get Nate, I'm going to get Thomas, and we're going to talk about swearing. So here we are today to talk about swearing.
In childhood. Sorry,
It-
I just wanted to add that.
It's not what we say in our household. It's about work. It's about, yeah, us in our professional roles. We do have some hot seat questions. So obviously we spoke about swearing in our very first podcast because you asked me the hot seat question of have I ever sworn at work, which got me reflecting on swearing with children swearing within early years or within USH, either one. But I was really thinking about young children, those under fives, you know, they're still developing those language acquisition skills, but almost like they're the ultimate researchers. They're testing hypothesis. They want to see what happens when they say it. They want to see the reactions that come out. And often how, I suppose, our reaction as adults, then I don't know what I'm saying. So our reaction as adults then promotes their reaction.
Right.
Like if we're shocked, they've tested it a bit like, oh, what's happening here? Or if we laugh, it's something different, and it helps them kind of make decisions about their world in how we react to what they're saying. And we all know children have heard it either from an older sibling, the parents accidentally dropped the F, or and then
Accidentally.
well, you don't often want to say it in front of your 3-year-old, but sometimes it comes out and then they want to go and use it at daycare.
I have a question which I would love the guests to intervene. If I was to write down factors, one of the factors I would say, which you just mentioned, is that they're testing waters, right? Language acquisition, they're learning words, and so here's a question, and anyone can answer this. Maybe I'll start with Thomas. Are they testing waters on language acquisition, or can I say, are they testing waters of adult reaction? Which one do you reckon?
It's definitely. I definitely feel it's the adult reaction because swearing for me often it's a reactive sin thing, or in a child situation where there's the exploratory element. They're looking. They're provoking, and they're looking for that reaction. And if you're, as an educator, looking to either react in that way, and maybe emotions get into it, and your energy gets to that level, you're going to either escalate it and build it to make it worse than maybe what you really anticipated. So I guess for me, when I have these conversations, in particular with swearing, it is that, how do you respond to that child? And if your goal is to maybe, guide the child in a way where they may not swear often, well, you have to think about how you're reacting, because if you're going to respond in a way where it's a high energy, well, it's just going to keep building, and that energy is just a multiplier, and it's just going to make the situation and give that child exactly what they're trying to achieve here, and solidify and go, gosh, this is a powerful thing to do. I can swear and react. I can get these adults who we've spoken a bit about, adults having the loudest voice, or we make all the decisions, which is another topic, but all of a sudden they can get this adult to do exactly what they were hoping for. It's an interesting dynamic.
Yeah.
Well, I think you touched on it about it being powerful. If children are testing their worlds, if an adult overreacts, like there's a power there. It's exciting. And that's not a reflection on that child. That child isn't being naughty, but they're testing, they're researching, they're saying, what happens when I say this? What reaction do I get? So I think, if you overreact, there's a sense of power. Whereas if you kind of stay calm and maybe acknowledge the curiosity, it's not as exciting to say those words.
Well, Nate, talking about responses, what's your goal? Okay, I know that you and I both have experienced children swearing. So I would like to know your input on, when Thomas talked about responding, how do you usually respond? And maybe that's a hard question. Do you laugh at it? Do you go, I agree with you? Or do you what's your response?
I mean, all of the above. I mean, because swearing's so contextual, and I usually respond to it in the context that it's given. It's interesting hearing just how we respond to, or how grown-ups respond to swearing. And when you pose that question and open it up, we went to, I guess, more of a confrontational context for it, or swearing at educators or for the benefit of adults, say. And I was thinking to myself that there's like a step before that. I think the genesis of swearing, or children's use of swearing, is never, adults are never in that equation, at least in my experience.
Yeah.
I might be very blessed that I don't have children swearing at me very often. But what I've observed with swearing is that it's mostly happening between children in their personal interactions that we are overhearing.
Quite interesting how this is a little bit different to what Thomas said, but there are layers of it. Okay, so for example, when Thomas,
sorry, continue. Well, no, because that's like what Thomas was saying is absolutely right, and I think when children start using swearing, they hear it, they pick it up, they watch movies, they are my child, so they know all the words.
From movies, okay. Sure.
But I think it has to be from the reactions of adults to that first hearing them say that it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. I don't think many children generally are going to learn a word and then start like firing off to everybody. But when they start like using the word that they've picked up, and then whoa, this has so much power. It's like, whoa, that's like, oh, your reaction to this is absolutely crazy. And when you get those big reactions, you're sitting on something pretty good.
Yeah.
So then
that's a good segue. I mean, that's a good connection, not segue rather, because when Thomas mentioned about how they could do it to kind of express power, or to show that they have power, or resist power, or to enforce power, adults being the one in power otherwise, and this ability to swear kind of give them power. Whereas when I was listening to you, the earlier part, when you mentioned something about adult not being in that equation, I hear a little bit about the peer culture in it, as in how the language that you and I may hear, like the reason why you and I may swear versus why a child swears to another child could be very different. Not could be, seems to be very different. But I want to add one more line kind of to what Thomas said, and then add Nate's words to it. We all swear to get a reaction, isn't it? So if everybody was reacting positively, even to an adult swearing to another one, why would we swear? Is it to get a reaction or to feel good about ourselves? Because sometimes
it's a really good release. Like you drop the bomb and okay, I feel better.
Can we start, just back is to say, like, how do we define a swear word? Are we just talking about the intention? Like, is it then a word which purpose is to offend or to have that? Like, how do we, because then that could be, and I know a conversation I used to have was being at this different context, Catholic organization, maybe where I used to work was, I would say in my household, oh my God, using the Lord's name in vain. That was worse than any swear word you could say ever. And it's a good example to say, well, for some, this is offensive, and for others, it's laughable.
Or I know in the past I've had children come up to me and they've said, Helen, Joe Blow said the S word. And I'm like, oh no, like, what did they say to you? And they said stupid.
Is that?
And in what you just said about if it's got the intention to offend, then possibly, yes, that is a swear word to that child. But to me, stupid isn't really a bad word. But I just want to backtrack 2 secs, I think, because one thing we're touching on, and I think it's really interesting, is when children use profanity, it's we need to acknowledge that they're not using it in the ways that we understand it. So I think when Thomas said about power, it's not about they feel powerful when they use it. Well, maybe they do, because when they use it, especially for adult overreacts, they're like, oh, this is what happens when I use this one. Let me try that again. And then yeah, I think it's a really interesting to kind of acknowledge the fact that I think the way we interpret swearing is very different to the way a child interprets swearing.
Therefore, the question that I wrote down right then is kind of stemming from what Thomas said was, is swearing is based on the context of intentionality. It's not that what the words mean. And I think that's a really good way. Like, I would love to have Nate's view on it. Nate, you and I have talked about language and the language constructing reality. The actual word, the F word, the S word. When you said the S word, didn't think it was going to be stupid. I thought it was going to be shit, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, but
That was
again, that's. But did you think the same, Thomas?
Oh, I mean, I
that was the
possibly
point.
thought it was
Yeah, that was
another
the point.
S
Yeah.
word.
Yeah, that's the whole point. Like how the language constructs reality. That's kind of psychologically speaking. However, if we were to think about the swear word or is based on the intentionality, then kind of that the intention is achieved, and so that's why, Nate, what's your point on that? In terms of, is the word itself inherently bad, or the intention it achieves makes it bad or good, or like a goal achieved kind of thing?
Oh, we're going really deep with
Mm-hmm.
that. We're getting like really deep into like the nature of language. But my personal view on it is that it really is contextual. Like just
Okay.
the nature of the word that they're using doesn't really convey intent. But my response to it would be based on what I determine that intent to be.
In that
Right.
very
So, yeah, like if somebody, wait, I don't know if you've already sworn. Can we swear, or am I just doing F bombs and stuff?
you go on, but you can say F word or whatever.
F
Go
word?
on.
Yeah.
Go
Well,
on.
no, but so if somebody's like stubs their toe and says, "Oh, F,"
Yeah.
then I'm not going to blow up at them.
Mhm.
That's just like it's like, okay, that's just pure. Look, we talk about self-expression, and there is really cathartic release. It feels really good. I can't think of personally any replacement that I could use in my personal life. As much as I have a swear jar and I try to be a good example to my family, if I stub my toe, I feel better when I'm like, "God damn it!"
Yeah,
Mhm.
oh bother doesn't quite cut it as good as a
No,
good.
it doesn't. It doesn't. So, but if that same child is directing that at somebody else, then that's where my
Okay.
reaction might come
So
into it, and
if
I'd
you
handle it differently, because that's an issue then.
no, I get it. I have a question. So if you, not necessary to you, I just have a maybe funny question. So if you direct it at the door, it's okay. If you direct it at a child, it's
Yes.
not okay, isn't it?
Yep.
If it's like a tree, you can swear at it. At a pillow, you can swear at it. But if it is a human being, don't do it.
Yeah. So, my reaction to a child hurting themselves, or, maybe they're trying to build a paddle pop stick structure and then it all collapses in, and they're like, fuck. My reaction to that is going to be way different. It's going to be more understanding, and it's going to be like, oh, we probably don't want to use that word.
Well, as we've discussed,
Right.
if parents are the first teachers and they've learnt at home that when something goes wrong, that's the natural response, then, they didn't really do anything wrong, because when something crashes down at home, mum says, oh, F. So when I've crashed my paddle pop tower or Lego at home,
Mm.
is it such a bad thing?
Yeah, there's an inherent hypocrisy to it that we have to acknowledge. Like there's a lot of traditional thinking around it, and
Mm,
I think part of our process is that we try to dismantle traditional thinking.
mm,
Um, so children can't say it. It's like, okay, so they can say it, and they say it a lot,
mm,
and they get made to feel bad and wrong, and
yep,
we just pointing that out doesn't mean that, okay, no, green card for everyone just to say whatever they want.
mm,
It's like all learning opportunities. Like you were
mm,
saying that just before about, oh, they said that S words, because we deal with a lot of younger children now, and they're getting bailed up with their use of language with toilet words. Oh, you can't
Yeah.
use that's a toilet word. And it's like, yeah, but are they pooping? They're pooping. They've pooped. You can say poop. It's not it's not bad and wrong.
Yeah.
But if you call somebody a poop, then there's a boundary that's been crossed. There's a lack of respect happening, and hey, we got to deal with that because we're here to help you navigate these kinds of relationships. And if you're going to be an
Yeah.
actor in this space and with other people, then that's not language that's going to be effective for you there.
Moving forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I have a question. I know, Thomas, you have a view, but I'd rather have a question and then you can add your view. Sorry, I interrupted you. I kind of saw you take a deep breath and I thought,
Yeah,
I'll just
time
jump in
to-
first.
he's ready to go.
I'm so glad. So Nate talked about inherent hypocrisy, which is kind of Thomas also mentioned about working at a Catholic organization at his own home, about traditional views, but when you go out, there are people from different backgrounds. Anyways, right? Especially children have their own culture going on, and adults have their own culture. There you go. There's another divide, not just the religious or the spiritual divide, but rather also cultural divide, right there. But I have a question. Talking about hypocrisy, Thomas, have you ever secretly found it funny when a child has sworn, and even though you had to go tell him off, or not tell them off, but even though your response was going to be, "Hey, we shouldn't do that," but in your mind you're like, "Man, that was really funny, though." Has that ever happened?
I, I, so you asked me the question about hypocrisy. Very funny you asked me that because I was going to comment on that word itself about slightly different. Is that I didn't want to say it's like there's a hypocrisy about it or being hypocritical because I think to some extent as a teacher or as an educator, there might be some ideal outcome we're striving. And just because we don't always live it, I'm not going to view myself saying, oh, I'm going against, I do swear.
Mm-hmm.
But my teachings is always, this is my stance on it, or this is what I strive for. And I think that sense is to say there's no negativity to go, well, even if we, make a mistake, it's okay. We can all make mistakes. We have those frustrations. But I guess with this whole conversation, and I'm sorry, could you just repeat yours
Question.
before I
Have
go
you
on?
ever found it funny
Oh
approaching a
yeah.
child?
So of course, like I laugh at everything and anything. Like I think it was probably more. I'm probably going to laugh at well, you've got the juxtaposition. Sometimes you've got like a toddler comes out and they say something you're like, oh, okay, you just said something that you don't even know what you've said. And I think, there's a hilarious factor that comes with it.
Yeah.
I even think on the other senses, the question for you, Helen, I'm not going to admit it or details about it. Have I sworn in front of a child? Yes. The child's reaction was, oh my goodness, this guy who is meant to be perfect has just said something. That's hilarious. So it wasn't like the child just stared and laughed at me. That was the result. He just thought it was hilarious. So I think there's comedy about it.
I just sorry, I'm not gonna interrupt Helen this time. I just saw something. Found kind of when you saw in front of that random child, and he found it funny, and then Helen also had sworn in, and of course I have, and Helen also had sworn in front of a child. You know what it's telling me? That the swearing, going back to what Nate or you said, is so contextual
Yeah.
because words inherently don't necessarily have the meanings. The meanings are given to those words based on the connection or the relationship that the individuals share. If I had said those words in front of a random kid at a Woolies store, at a Woolies or Coles, we are looking for sponsorship at Woolies or Coles, then the child might have seen me as a very different guy. Whereas if a child who has been with me for a while, just that is, you said that the child was A, surprised, and B, kind of laughed at it. Surprised because he already has some sort of connection with you and didn't expect that to come out of your mouth. So it is telling me how culture plays such an important role in swearing. That is, when
Well,
swearing is occurring within a culture, it is then could be seen as bad or good based on that. Because you could have a
I
really good
think that
connection.
can lead into we like to do hot seat questions in
Yeah,
our
okay.
podcast, and Thomas has talked about what you teach the children, and you just spoke about the context of you wouldn't walk up to a random child in Woolworths and start swearing. So the question I want to put forward to both Thomas and Nate is, and Sarah, we know you'll chime in. Should we be teaching children the right place at the right time for swearing instead of trying to stop it altogether?
Could I jump in first? Sorry, Nate, because this was probably what I wanted to end with. Is this question was what I teach my team? I put swearing and manners kind of in the same category because it's not that I want children to say yes, please, thank you, sorry, or children have to not swear, or we shouldn't, because we're not here saying these are the rules, obey me. If any service is doing that, I think that's where we're having that conversation. We're trying to empower children.
Mm-hmm.
The goal is, and this is my conversation I have all the time, is we want children to want to say please and thank you, but they can only do that if they understand why they do it.
Yeah, but
Be not-
we're going to move right away from the question I just asked. But is that more about you or an educator putting your own adult discomfort onto the child?
Well, so my natural tactic in these situations tend to be a personal response and I think that's where you need to have a relationship with the child. You need to have that child want to like you and want to be a friend. Where if you don't want a child to swear or swear at, or hypothetically, even if they stub their toe, but probably better yet is probably in a game of soccer and something goes wrong and they go off swearing, is to say, I get offended because of X, Y, and Z. And if that continues, I'm going to have to reconsider where I'm playing. And it's kind of like that. I'm offended. This is my personal rules. But if you do it here or you do it there, like that's their choice. And it's probably just trying to just have that conversation the best way you can in those moments.
What about you? Yeah, what about you, Nate? What do you reckon?
I think that lines up pretty closely to my approach to it, where it's more, I don't know that if I explicitly would say that, oh no, this is the situations that you want to use that language in, but I do have a respect for private conversations, right? My whole job is to walk around with heightened senses, so I'm picking up stuff. So, but if it's happening in the context of a private conversation between two peers, I'm really not going to have like a really big reaction. I might mention it, let them know, come on, we've got preps playing over here. That's not the language that you want to be using in this space with all these people around. That would be like, and then, yes, what you're saying, Thomas, is right. And we can say that for everything. I think we are, as educators, we're designed for it, but any behavior that shows up is an opportunity for like guidance and like intentional teaching. So yeah, wait, have I answered the question?
Yeah. Helen has another question.
An interesting one I just want to raise though, because I feel like it needs to be mentioned, especially working with school age children. Um, Behavior is a really loud communicator. And
Mm.
Mhm,
sometimes when that children is saying the F, they like they're in crisis. They want you to know they're in crisis.
mhm,
And I've seen it a few times in services where, and it's always that double-edged sword. Like I've had educators, come to me and say, Helen, they're being disrespectful, they're doing this, they're doing that. But two things were going on there. For example, there's some kids I can think of right now, high trauma needs.
mhm,
They were 100% communicating that everything was not okay with them. But two, the thing with that particular situation is the more the educator reacted to the initial F bomb, I mean, I didn't actually know you could put that selection of words together and it could just it was the supercalifragilistic of
yeah.
swearing. And I myself am not even willing to say some of those words in this recording. But the point was the more the educator got on top of that child about the initial F bomb, the more the language came out.
Mhm.
And that was it was communicating, and yes, it wasn't nice, and yes, okay, disrespectful, but I think there's a balance there, and it's really hard as an educator to sometimes work out where you balance it. And so again, I say, do we teach right place at right time, or do we say not at all?
I actually, building on Nate's answer, when he was talking about, your question included time and place, whereas Nate's answer was more about space. And it
Mm,
just he just bypassed those time and place,
mm,
because again, contextually speaking, he's not talking to a random kid. He's talking to the kids he already knows the names of,
mm,
and they know his name, and how much relationship building is required. So I go back to your answer, your experience of the F bomb at a particular service, a child. So uh, the educator going there to stop swearing or stop from swearing to happen and trying to educate time and place versus an educator walking there and saying, what's happening over here?
mm.
Like what's going on over here?
Swearing, but we're just referring to behavior, and
Yeah.
that's the
Well,
same.
I can
Because
give
in
you I can actually give you an example because I've seen it, same child, and I've seen two different educators' approaches to it. Really interesting. So the
Mhm.
one educator that wanted to chase the child under the table to wag their finger and say, "No, you shouldn't say that. That's terrible," and then copped a range of abuse. Whereas I saw another educator one day, the child had said the F, and the educator just walked past and said, "Did I just hear what I think I heard?" And the child kind of squared up and said, "Yes, you did." And the educator said, "Do you think I want to hear it again?" And she stopped for a second and went, "Probably not."
Mhm.
And
Eh,
that was a really interesting to me to see same child, two different educators responding to the language.
mhm.
And the child just went on and played after that, but they also had that prompt to go,
Well,
"Oh, maybe not
yeah,
okay."
may I, if I add something about that behavior, about power, about what
Mm,
Thomas and Nate have added, just another example, and then a little bit of caution at the end. So
mm,
example being, not example, like my observation says, the people who are swearing are usually more often the victim of being
mm,
bullied. They're not the
mm.
ones who are bullying. So
Yeah.
you just observe from a distance, like just stand at a. I know swearing will make you, will kind of trigger your culture, your tradition, and your education, and you want to go and fix it. But you just stand there for just for a moment and just observe for a little longer. If you observe for a little longer, you'll see that the kid who has been kind of pushed around 3 or 4 times by another child. He was first in the line, but now other kids are going in, and he has actually approached a couple of educators, but they haven't done much about it. So here he goes, yells at them, F you, go away, F you, go away. He's actually saying this after having, he or she, or they, like they're saying it after they have gone through something that unfavorable situation. Now you
Mm,
may say, no, Saurabh, I have observed a child who was not that. He just started abusing other kids anyways. Well, then I'm saying that's because our observation is only a little keyhole observation. There's something happening in the school, at home, or yesterday. But usually, and in our own experiences as well, check yourselves, educators and adults listening to it. The times that you have been swearing, Haven't you already been pressed and pushed, and then you just had nothing to give? So a child, if you were to approach a child by thinking this kid has already been pushed and pressed and whatever, it might just change the approach. It
Well,
might
especially,
influence the approach. Yeah.
yeah, and especially if what you're saying, like if it is a point of escalation, it's our job as educators to be that calming presence that's trying to regulate together rather than
Yeah.
wagging our fingers and just saying no. But I think it's interesting because I think swearing in the different settings in early years, we know younger children are testing, whereas
Yeah.
we know in at a school I was a carer, it's a bit different because you know there's a range of reasons why children swear. Now, I've got another question. Let's see if we can actually get this one answered this time because, we've all got so much to say. But in our hot seat one is, and I would like to hear both Nate and Thomas's answers to this. Do you personally think swearing is really that bad, or is it just a social construct we enforce on children?
Hey, please go.
uh, is swearing really that bad? No. Is it just a social Yes. All of our interactions with other people are social contracts, and I think a lot of our intentional teaching comes down to, if we time and place, it's about scaffolding that for them. I think listen, so the younger the child is, the language acquisition's happening, they're trying it out. Say testing the waters, I don't know if they're actually testing anything. I think they just hear a word and then they are saying it, and then we socially construct around them based on our reactions. But they start off with toilet words. We can't even say penis, can't say poop or wee. They said the S word. What was the S word? Oh, they told me to shut up. It's like, okay, well, were you being annoying? Did you need to shut up? But I think the older, and we have this big range of ages in like outside school hours care and in schools, the older a child gets, the more they start to realize the reactions they get around swearing is there's something hinky going on. It's not right.
Yep.
So when you get somebody wagging the finger at you, it doesn't make you go, oh man, I'm so bad. A lot of the times the older the child gets, they're going to be thinking, mind your business.
Yeah.
What's going on here? You're really over here trying to pin me for this? Like, it's so yeah.
It is being imposed. It seems like the social construct is imposing on the child, the construct that we've created. Thomas, what's your view on that?
I think it's just a loaded question. Yes.
That's why it's a hot seat question, Thomas.
Yeah, it is, obviously. But then does that mean, I guess it's, for me, the question is it right or wrong is more the focus point is, language itself will develop and change through where society is at the moment. There's, swear words, if I said as well, like if we're just going to say it's offensive words, there's a long list of new words you could add to swearing, and then maybe other words get taken off. I'm sure, saying stupid might have been, I'm not sure if that was on the radar at any stage, but, at some point it might have been a swear, but look, I think it is. I just feel that there's nothing wrong as well with just talking about what is offensive and not offensive. And going back to the parents as well is, I'm here as an educator to work with schools, to work with families, and the culture and the dynamic that they're trying to create within the community. I feel it's on us to kind of build on that. And you want to equip children so they have their own autonomy to be a part of it and have a voice within that community. But what comes about that is also that understanding that, yeah, well, to be in this community, there are some rules we kind of need to follow, and this is that dynamic of their learning and understanding. So it's yeah, it is imposed
Yeah.
on everybody in some way. Is it a bad thing? Is it a good thing? I probably say no. It is a good thing. It's the world we live in, and you know, I I enjoy it. So
I like
Although
when Thomas says, I enjoy it. Okay.
in our first episode, though, Sarah brought up a point which I think is really interesting, and Sarah, I would like to hear more from you on this. You were I find it really interesting, Thomas. We know you work for Wesley Mission, and obviously you've got your set of values that you're supposed to work around, and I'm not saying that's a negative thing. Of course, it's great. Like everyone needs to have values. But Sarah, you brought up in episode 1 that when you go and often work at remote
Yeah.
services,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
the educators don't even react to some of those words because it's natural language within that community. And Thomas, I like that you use the word the community. You're there to work with the community you're in. And I suppose that's an interesting thing about where you are as an educator also dictates how you respond and what you do.
I think this podcast is created so that educators can take something out of this. Okay. Hopefully, fingers crossed. Um, but I got triggered by that response too, and I was like trying to put my hand up, and you guys were cleverly ignoring me, which was so good on you guys. I've trained you really well.
put a
But
post-it note over your face so I don't even see. It's
okay, so I was actually coming to that point when Thomas mentioned space, as community, and then Nate had mentioned space. There is, and Thomas had also mentioned something about an outcome, an ideal outcome that we try to achieve in as an educator working with children. There's this concept of time and permission and allowances, and it is again driven by community. So I had a chat with a kid who swore, and then he asked me, "Do you swear?" And I said to him, "Yes, I do, but I can get my work done without swearing nowadays." And as I'm talking to him, his mom comes in and comes to pick him up. And he is actually a child of one of the educators who, because they have 3 or 4 services in this area. So his mom works at a different service, but still for the same organization. She comes to pick him up and he says, "Oh, I say this because my mom says it at home in front of her." And there I'm standing, no longer to working or educating this child. I'm also now dealing with this awkward conflict which exists that, oh, damn, the secret is out. So I continued by saying, I swear, and yes, I swear, but I'm also realizing in my life that I can get my work without get work done without swearing. And as I'm speaking to him now, this was a 3-day session, 3-day workshop at this community. I knew that it's not a 3-day thing. It's maybe a 30-day thing. It may be a 50-day thing. But if I sit there thinking I need to achieve this outcome tonight or by 30 days or by 15 days, then there are other players in this conversation, the mother, the community. So it's like, because and then going back to the culture thing, because us educators, and I think we all are in that situation. Thomas, you go to several services. Helen, you also go to several services. You don't just have work at one service alone. You go to several services. And Nate, you too. You have been to several people. You kind of work with many people. Isn't a culture different in every school, every service, every long day care? And therefore, I think, and this is what I would request educators to kind of critically reflect on. When you watch children swear, consider there's a culture called the children culture, peer culture. When you walk into a different service, consider space, time, culture. There's a different culture at that school. So what am I saying is, observe a little longer before you start enforcing your construct. Could have been from your childhood or whatever you believe in, because you might come across not belonging to that culture. And you will be, children may comply in front of you, but as soon as you go away, they will not just swear, but this time they'll swear at you. Okay? So if you say, "Oh, I don't go to several services, or I just work at this service," well, then here's the thing: children have their culture. Observe a little longer, because we are talking about so many points here. And when I'm wrapping it up, I will show those points. But what do you think? Nate, you seem that you wanted to say something when I was saying.
Oh, Yeah, look, it's such a dense topic. I think there's like just so much to unpack with it all, and there's so many different aspects um, to cover. Obviously, we're not going to get through even like the majority of what it is, but um, yeah, I think. Oh, what did I want to? What did I want to say? It's. I know. I really liked um, what you were saying about how you know an educator can potentially other themselves from
Mm-hmm.
the child. So the child you're trying to reach, and you come at it the wrong way, and you've just othered yourself,
Mm.
and then you've lost a lot. You've lost by demanding
Mm.
respect, and maybe from an age group where they're like, this doesn't have anything to do with you. Why are you taking it so personally? It's so weird that you're including yourself in my life right now. Um, you know, so I found that to be very.
I think one question I've got, because I think if I think about, 18, 20 years ago, Helen, who first started in the sector and would very firmly say, we do not swear here and those are not words that we can use here, or whatever I would say back then. And then if I reflect on my journey and what's got me to here and how I'm a little bit more mindful about how I react and how I have discussions with children, I suppose in your journeys as educators and working with children, what can you see yourselves about, the way you interact with children when they say those words?
Yeah.
What has changed for you, Thomas?
Mm.
Well, to firstly say when I stepped into the to the sector, I was pretty much perfect. So the growth
Of
was there.
course, of course.
That was 20 years ago, wasn't it? Like,
Yeah. So
yeah, see,
it's
I'm
not even
listening this time.
grew a bit of a beard. No, look, I think with that is we've had the pleasure, if you want to call it that, of being exposed to so many different situations. And like it all, it puts it all into context. And yes, one, you get to see what works, what doesn't work, but then you've seen so much that you look at it and you go, is that worth this? Is this, whether or not it is swearing or not, but if you ever say, I'm going to put my foot down, is this battle worth the outcome?
Yes.
And I just want to comment quickly, and I'll be super quick on this, was Sarah, when you're talking about community, I have to flag, we have a particular place a service that we run. We warn every educator, every person that goes there, hey, FYI, if you get offended by swearing, you're going to get triggered. So
Please.
keep that in mind. This service, it's and like you said, it's part of the children's culture, and
Yeah.
we have those conversations, but it's bigger than us, and it's not going to change, and it is just different.
But I think that's I think that's a really important point that you've just touched on, Thomas. As educators, we have a choice to choose what we will and won't put up with. And if you are not so, like, for an educator that's really going to be triggered by swearing, it's really great for them to know that that's not the right place for them to work.
Yeah. Or
So
there is something to learn for them here. I'm going to come to, I would like to know what changed for Nate, but I just have this opportunity to just add something. Educator, and as Thomas was talking about how they kind of pre-warn the educator going into this community. I often say, and it's coming up on my Facebook, Instagram page today, educator is someone who is willing to be educated. If you think that you're just the person who's going to educate others, wrong answer. Just because sometimes the word educator makes us so entitled. We think that we are there to just educate others. We're going to tell you what the time, the place, the context, the culture is to swear, not swear, what words are good and bad. But here's the thing. When you walk into a culture different to yours, if you're not willing to be educated by that culture, you are an other. Like just as Nate said, you other yourself. You are not there, and then you are only thing you're gonna experience that day is going to be offended, rejected, you name it. So it's very important how when Thomas's team is trying to tell people, if you don't keep your mind open and you think I'm an educator, I'm going to go and educate instead of I'm an educator, I need to be educated. That distinction is very, very important. So before we go into that one, I would like to know, Nate, has anything changed, or were you also very perfect, just like Thomas, with the day when you started working with children, and how you might have approached a kid swearing then versus now?
Yeah, that's interesting. That's an interesting question. I'd have to sit and think about that. Education is a very personal
Hmm.
thing.
Yeah.
So I can say that I've pretty much tried all approaches,
Yeah.
and have settled on the stuff that works for me. Um, and what works for some person isn't going to work for other people. My relationship with swearing, who I am, what my culture is. So
Mm.
being Australian born, but then even just if we minimize community to my family, I grew up in a family where you did something stupid and my mum would say, "Oh, you fucking dickhead," you
Mm.
know, um, or it's like, "Oh, stop being a fart smeller." It's just stuff like that. It's like real stupid stuff like that.
Mm.
So if somebody calls me that, I don't have any like big outward emotions.
Mm.
But again, that's context, right?
You
Um,
feel like the home is calling. You see? Someone's-
yeah. But with taking all that on, you do have to. It's like I'm not sitting here saying that you just ignore all swearing. You always have to deal with the swearing as it happens.
Mm.
It's just about who you are in that.
Yeah.
It's about who you are in that situation, and if you've positioned yourself in a way that you can give value to another person.
Yeah.
So,
That's a
um,
big word. Giving value rather than educating them. That's such a
yeah. Well, yeah. But otherwise, what you come in and you're like, you can't say that. That's so rude. You are blah 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 blah, and then you walk off, and then they go, "Oh, what a DH."
Mhm.
Saying you haven't achieved anything with that. You just made yourself look like a bit of a.
The other.
They just say some more words that you can't hear.
Well, there are a couple of points that I just wanted to add here for our audience, for the listeners. The thing is, we are not saying that if a bullying is occurring, that you can let it happen. And that's kind of stemming from what Nate said. It's not that we're going to allow that or just let it happen. You are going to intervene, but intervene from what attitude? I think that's what we are discussing here. We approach the situation with an attitude of now and I'm going to just fill this off. Nate just mentioned identity. Helen likes to talk about identity. Okay. Our identity is constituted by so many things. So for us, it's an experience. One thing, we all have experience in working. Second, I'm not just going to count and it ends. There are many more that I can't count at the moment. But some of them are identity, experiences, education that you have or not have. I'm talking about academic education here. I'm talking about the culture that you grew up in, the tradition that you grew up in, the language that you grew up in, as Nate said. All of that constitutes to your identity. And therefore, when Nate said, "Oh, I don't know what to say," that was such a good. Like, I have to sit down and think. That was such a good way to kind of go. I don't know why I do what I do. Like, do I approach it because of my childhood? Do I approach it because I've been told that F word is not allowed? Do I approach it because it's the ethos of my organization, or do I approach it because it's not good for that gender, or do I approach it because damn, why do I approach it? And that's the question I want to have educators listening. What constitutes your identity such that you either get offended, or B, you approach it by saying, "I've heard that before. Tell me more about it." Like,
I would
what's
love to see a critical reflection presented to an AO. We
Yeah, we will do that.
we reflected as a team on why we respond certain ways to certain words, and
Yeah.
I say it jokingly, but actually I'm quite serious. It would actually be really interesting as a group critical reflection to understand more about ourselves, to know why it is we respond for exactly what you've just said. Are we responding because it's the way we brought up? Are we responding due to some trauma in our past life?
Mhm.
Why are we responding in this way? And I think, we know that once we critically reflect and understand ourselves a little bit better, then we also, evolve and change the way we
Yeah.
interact with children as well. I would love to see a critical reflection project on
But talking
on,
about
on our
AO,
response.
talking about assessment officers, and I have some of them as my friends. I mean, they also deal with a lot of challenges in terms of they are walking into your culture. And sometimes 2 days are not enough for them either to go, oh, well, they are doing it well or not, because you are doing it because of so many other things that constitutes your culture. And I can't, again, we can keep counting on that. But I just wanted to add something very funny in this, and then take your final comments on all of that, by the way, people. Um, Coming from someone whose English is not a first language, I learned a lot of swear words that I can use and nobody gets offended here unless there's an Indian in the room. Okay. Uh, I've taught some to Nate also. Okay. And
I
Thomas
could do Mandarin.
and and Thomas knows Mandarin. And Nate's partner is Japanese. So I'm sure that Thomas. And hang on, is there any Australian in the room? Because we have Helen who must know Greek words too. So coming from India, when I came here for the back in 2008, when I was talking to a kid, he said, "You're a curry muncher." Now,
Sorry.
As Nate said that he grew up in a family where people were saying all of these things. Now, when he said, "I'm a curry muncher," I said, "Do you have some?" Because innocently, I didn't know that was a swear word. Because in reality, I do munch curries. I munched curries last night. So I am a curry muncher. So what happened was when he said you're a curry muncher, I thought, okay, if I approach to you, like everybody's laughing, but if I approach to you and say, "Do you play cricket?" You're gonna go, "Yeah." "Do you bat a ball?" Like second sentence would be like, "Yeah, I'm in." So when somebody says you're a curry muncher, I didn't think that he was saying. I thought he was asking. So I said, "Do you have some?" So firstly, we shouldn't share food with the kids anyway. So I mean, that's another problem with that. But I was quite new to I'm trying to say what has changed for me. Okay, so when his mom came and his mom apologizes to me for that comment, and because I wasn't offended, I was like, "Why are you commenting? Why are you apologizing?" Like, "Oh, my son called you Karim," and I'm like, "Yeah." That's fine. And then she told me why it is a swear word, yeah. And then she leaves. When she left, that's when I got offended. I was like, damn. But for those 2 hours that kid was around me, he would have thought, what a cool guy this is. What a cool, he is so cool because I just called him Karimancha and he's like fine with it. So I still, because of that cultural difference, although I've been here for 18 years, I still see words linguistically, language, which could be a different topic, linguistically very different. I don't see fuck fuck word as others would say because I had to learn that word as I was learning English. It was discussed in a room. It was in a dictionary. I had to go to a dictionary, look for the synonyms, look for the thesaurus, look for synonyms and write a sentence with fuck in it. Like when you're learning English, you have to learn all of those words. You didn't just wait for to come to Australia and learn it. I mean, Australia educated me a lot of new words like numbnut. Like there's another word that I learned, numbnut, like
Oh,
numbhead. I don't know. I travel to places and I'm learning, but it is what I'm trying to conceptualize here is the word inherently. We aren't offended by the word. We are offended by the meaning associated. But here's the thing. You and I add that meaning. It's not the meaning associated because of the thesaurus or the dictionary. And you and I, coming back to the identity, you and I have constituted are have built with so much of things constitute us, and we may not even know what meaning we are giving to the word. So maybe a critical reflection question would be: when you hear a word, what happens to you? Okay.
Sorry, I'm still laughing. I can't get over it. And of
Well,
course, I think, and we don't, we're supposed to be wrapping up, but it's opening that door to that conversation of the context and the way you understand words can bring completely different meanings.
yeah, it does.
And that whole if I had have been there when that happened, I first probably would have been really offended for you, but
Mm.
also then found a bit your response super funny, as we just saw, because I almost couldn't bring myself back into center after I lost it. But yeah, I think as well, realizing that for some children in our care, and again, and this is that self-reflection point, what we find really offensive, it's just a word in their
Yeah.
house,
And think about it, that he must have waited for an Indian educator to come close to him before he could, before he could get that reaction. So he just waited for me to get it, like, hey, can I tell you something? You're curry manja. Like, I'm like, okay, do you have
And the
some?
shock value of all this is we had a great facilitator that some words, and it's that shock factor, are just funny.
Yeah.
It's that surprise, and it's okay to be funny. It was a great facilitator that said bums are funny.
Yeah.
That makes me think of that, Helen. But it's the same as why
we
you're
did
now.
we did do a I did do a PD session with at Wesley where I did discuss how hilarious bums are. It's fun. It's a funny word. Bums are funny. They do great things. They fart. Farts are funny. But
So
different people. Some people are so offended by farts
by
as
that
well.
word, yeah.
Farts is probably
Okay.
even a rude word.
hmm we will keep talking about this, and I think we will invite you again. And when
Yes.
Helen and I have sat down and reflected on it. But any final thoughts? And actually, instead of saying a final thought question, I want to ask, because you want our listeners to kind of find themselves in this podcast. Yeah. Is there any challenge or anything that you would like to tell the listeners about swearing? Thomas, if I may start with you, your final comment on that. What might you give an advice to anyone asking you this question?
I'm not going to give advice specifically around swearing. I've got a couple things that I'm taking away.
Mhm.
And look, the inside joke about this is that often I repeat what Saurabh says to my team and pretend like it's my own words. My statement this time around isn't from him, which is surprising. I think one big takeaway is the statement you said, Nate, where position yourself to give value. And I think I know you said to give value, and that was your focus point, but for me was that to position yourself. And I think with everything that we're doing, I always fall back on building relationships. Is no matter what we're doing, we're trying to be in this community. We're trying to, teach and guide children, or to give something back or give value to the children. You've got to have a relationship with them, and you have to build your position yourself within that community that you actually can. So no matter what we discuss and what we want to do or how we want to do it, if you don't start there, none of it's going to come. None of it's going to work. So for me, look, that was my biggest kind of takeaway from today.
That's a good one.
Was
Yeah.
that really like position yourself that you can actually make a difference?
Nate.
Yeah, well, it's funny that you say that, because my takeaway is from what you said, Thomas, and I think we may have all touched upon it. But if we were to give something useful, even Helen did. We all kind of laughed about a big critical reflection on swearing, and Thomas, you were saying, is this the battle? Is this the hill we want to die on? Is this the fight that we want to score points on right now? It just comes back to, critical reflection. We need to be asking ourselves. I think any educator that has like a really visceral reaction to swearing can really benefit from reflecting on it. And it's like, well, why am I so activated? And in the aftermath, how effective was I? Have I damaged the relationship with the child? Is there something that, like, do I even need to be this activated?
Yeah.
And who would I be in that other situation? So, it's very. I think swearing is a really good topic to
Critically reflect.
Invite people to
Reflect on.
critically reflect on.
Yeah, I agree.
So, yeah.
Helen, what's your view?
Okay, what did I take away? I mean, so much. But one thing, it's a mixture of, again, what everyone said. But
What a
then
great panel.
Thomas just wound up with saying, talking about building relationships. And we know as educators, forming those really strong quality relationships with the children we care for takes time. And I want to just caveat, I'm not saying that when a child swears, it's not a teachable moment and you don't talk to them and you don't pull it up. I'm not saying you just let children go willy-nilly. Like, there is a time and place. But I think if we're concentrating on the relationships we build and using that term again that even Nate just said, is that the hill we want to die on? Do we destroy our relationships with children by going in hard and wagging our finger and saying, you should not say that word, it's so inappropriate, blah, blah, blah? Or do we find a different approach because our relationships with our children are very, very precious? And if we reflect, do we want to destroy that relationship because of a word?
And I would have said other things, but now since you mentioned the word teaching moment as a final thought, when somebody is swearing, that could be for fun, intentionality, but it could also be because that child is being bullied or has been pushed. And we often talk about this thing called teaching moment, which is again, educators feeling that they have to educate, but it may not be the time because there's something called learning moment. And it may not be a learning moment for a kid who is already going through a meltdown situation. So, as Nate, as Thomas said, time, as Nate said, space may not be the space and the time to talk about those things. Register it for critical reflection.
Yes.
Register it. We are not saying let it happen. Register it. Calm down also, because if you're getting triggered by swearing, that it tells us something about ourselves, an unhealed portion of ourselves. Like I still don't get offended by the word curry muncher or some other words that I hear from children. But I do get offended by certain words. So that's something that tells me about myself. And look for learning moment. Is the child ready to learn? And I think ending with the word relationship, relationship is what we create even in the times of breakdown or in the times of when we're having that conversation. But fundamental to all this is understanding what culture we are in and the relationship that we build during in that culture. With that, thank you very much, because I have a few questions that I haven't even asked you guys, because our kind of time is up. You all are busy people. Thank you for giving time, and Nate, thanks for coming in, because I know that you have to go back to your service. Thomas, thanks for coming. I hope that I'm saying thanks on behalf of all the listeners who would value so much from what you've given, and Thomas, you've been working for 20 years. I listen, and you've been perfect for those 10 years, which is so good. As you said, you're perfect from day one. Thank you, Nate, for a good friendship and for critically giving me words and changing my construct. Helen, thanks for always motivating me and coming up with new words. And any final thought, or we say goodbye?
The final thing I'll say before we say goodbye is thank you two so much. It's been really enjoyable to have these conversations with you two. And I definitely do think we probably need about another 25 episodes on swearing. We could probably fill it. So I want to encourage anyone that's listening and has got this far in the podcast. We do have a Google form if you want to add your own thoughts to swearing. And I even want, if you don't agree with anything you heard today, please tell us, because we want to discuss it. So please get on the Google Forms. You can find us on social media. Saurabh, where do we find your...
I didn't tell you guys. Damn, I keep forgetting. Oh no. We Belong Education Facebook, Instagram at To We Belong. And then we've got Helen and my personal LinkedIn also. So please, but that Google form is really important for you to tell us about your feedback and it tells us that people are listening to us. So please, this episode will be out very soon. But till then, thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much, listeners, for your time. Look after yourself and the people you love. From We Belong Education Podcast, it's a goodbye. Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.